Hi, I'm Alex. I'm the Devil's Advocate. I review all kinds of pop culture on this channel: music, movies, TV, video games, anything I want, really, and related to leftist politics. And today, we are reviewing the last 3 episodes of Star Wars Andor on Disney Plus. And man, what a great show this was. I'm going to be talking about these episodes like you've seen them. This is full spoilers, so, if you haven't, go watch it. It's amazing. Please come back, watch this review. These last 3 were a little different than every other batch we've gotten this season, in that I feel like each episode was actually its own episode this time, except maybe 2 and 3, or rather 11 and 12. But I do feel like this was more episodic, and maybe it's the fact that episode 10 didn't have Andor in it at all. It was all about Luthen and Kleya. And as this episode's starting, I say to my fiance, I'm like, we never really got an answer of like why Luthen and Kleya even know each other, what their relationship is. Like, I wish we got a little more. And lo and behold, that's the whole episode. So it's 1 year later, of course. Dedra, Meero, has finally tracked down Luthen and shows up at the gallery. And even before she shows up, he's already like destroying the radio, and him and Kleya kind of know that they're closing in on them. Luthen also meets with Lonnie one more time, his informant in the ISB, who is like, he's calling an emergency meeting. He tells him this information that he learned scouring through Dedra's files, because he's had her like clearance card for over a year. He just hasn't told Luthen, because if he told Luthen, he'd know that he would make him use it, and he wasn't ready yet. So he has his wife and kid like stored away somewhere. He's ready to get out. He's like, this is it. This is the biggest information I could possibly bring you. I am out after this. You promised me. Like, here it is. And he tells him like about the Death Star. Basically, like, there is no energy project. It was all a lie. It was the big lie, the biggest lie, which harkens back to real life Nazis and how the biggest lie was their Holocaust. This is the Death Star, which can create holocausts like that, as we see in A New Hope. And Lonnie tells him this. They're on actually at the same place where Luthen met Mon Mothma last batch. It's a beautiful park area. And Lonnie tells him this, and he's like, okay, man, you'll be safe. Because he keeps saying, like, where am I going to go? Where am I going to go? And he's like, you'll go to Yavin. You'll be safe there. It's all right. And then we cut back to Lonnie, and he's dead on the bench. And, like, yeah, this is what you get for being a Nazi. Like, you were useful. Thank you very much. Now you're going to die. And also, we can't risk him ratting him out to the Empire to try to save his own ass and all that. So it's just, it's kind of tragic, but you're like, yeah, but you still deserve this. Then he meets with Kleya, and this gives us a little insight into their relationship, which we'll see throughout this episode. But it's the first piece where he's talking to Kleya. He's kind of frantic, and all he does is spit out like proper names, like nouns, just like the most important details of what Lonnie just told him, because Lonnie was kind of rambling. But he was like, energy project, Ghorman, Jeddah, Calkite, Kyber, giant super weapon, like just the essential parts, so that Kleya can remember them and repeat them to herself and be able to communicate this information. Now, they know that Dedra's getting close, so they go to prepare for that, and Kleya's trying to be like, all right, I'll be the one who gets burned, and Luthen's like, no, I'm doing it. you need to get this information to the rebellion, to Yavin. I'm gonna burn. And so he does, and he knows this. He knew it from season 1, saying, I'm working towards a sunrise I'll never see. And this is his moment. So Dedra comes to the gallery, and she's so full of herself. She's like, I finally got you. I've been looking for you. The whole scene is great. It's just filled with like tension, and they're kind of still pretending to be their characters, right? She's still pretending to be, oh, I'm just an official here for a routine inspection, or I have a piece that I'd like evaluated, and he's playing that role of art gallery man. Just, but they're throwing subtle innuendos out, and it's such a great scene until she pulls out the Starpath unit, which is the thing that he offered to Andor in the first batch of episodes, the first 3 episodes of season 1. So he knows she's got him, and she knows she's got him, and so she's reveling in this moment. Like, I've been looking for you. I finally found you. You cannot run anymore. And he's like, it doesn't matter. The rebellion's not here anymore. It's everywhere. You've lost. You've already lost. You're too late. And kills himself. Stabs himself. Does like a, sacrifice with this ancient knife that he was talking to her about. And she's like, okay, call in the squad because they're surrounded. Because, oh God, we need him alive. If not, I screwed up this whole thing. So Dedra gets Luthen to the hospital. They shut down a whole wing of the hospital to try and keep him alive. He is still alive, but he's unconscious. There's a cool moment with a nurse who's like, I have all these patients here. You can't just shut down this whole wing. And Dedra looks at her and is like, well, I know you care about your patients, so clearly you'll be better at moving them than we will be. Which, is a threat, and the nurse walks off to go do that. And we see this little tiny moment of, like, Dedra realizing, I just did another gross thing that's inhumane. But then she swallows it and just kind of stands up again, sure of herself. And it's maybe like a little hint of, like, Syril, or a little hint of the humanity we saw in the last episode of the Ghorman massacre, where she was like freaking out in the communication room. But now it's a year later, and she's gotten a lot better at like swallowing that humanity. And I like how we're seeing in the background of this entire series the build up not just to Rogue One, but to A New Hope, and how the rebellion is forming, and then, over the course of this season, Yavin getting built, and even this harkens back to the scene in A New Hope, where the Imperial officers are sitting around a table. It's the famous scene where Vader walks in and starts force choking someone. But I think everything said in this scene, Tony Gilroy must have watched and been like, okay, I want to do that, I want to do that, I want to do that. And one of the things mentioned is that Tarkin is like, we're not going to need the ISB anymore chasing down little rebel cells. We have this battle station, and we could just destroy the whole rebellion in one fell swoop. So we're seeing the end of the ISB, and like how they were so important and so integral and kind of had the most authority to do whatever in the Empire, and how it's been slowly stripped away, and there's less and less even just people around in like the communications room, in the ISB meeting chamber. There's just fewer and fewer people because fewer and fewer resources are going towards it, probably because the Death Star is almost finished, so the Emperor is like, yeah, we don't need that anymore. So Kleya's mission is to break into the hospital to kill Luthen. And this whole episode, we are getting flashbacks to Luthen's origin, which I didn't know if we were going to get. I thought maybe we'd just hint at it, but we get full-on flashbacks. And he was a sergeant in the early days of the Empire, massacring a people somewhere, we don't know. But it did this thing that Rogue One and Andor have done so well, which is take something that is so commonplace in Star Wars that we know, we're very familiar with, which is like stormtrooper chatter over the radios, and turn it into something horrifying. Because all we see in these flashbacks are, and we see the perspective of like behind netting, like clearly it's a child hiding. So they see Luthen, and Luthen's coming to this ship, and he's like exhausted, and he's drinking, and he hears all this chatter on the radio of them massacring people and screams and terrifying. Like, it's horrifying. And he starts saying, and he's drinking, and he's singing like out loud, like, stop, make it stop, make it stop, make it stop. So we're seeing where he started. This was the beginning of his rebellion. Like, he didn't want to slaughter innocents anymore. We see an Imperial officer come in and be like, hey man, what are you doing? Like, we got to get back out there. And he's like, I just came to reload and whatnot. And it's all still from this perspective of someone hiding in the walls or behind netting and stuff. And there's even a moment where I'm watching this and I'm like, did he see her? Did he see us? I don't know. And then the Imperial officer leaves. Luthen grabs a knife, opens the wall, because he doesn't know who's in there. But he knows someone's in there. And he spots the little girl who is Kleya. And realizes in that moment what he has to do. He has to get this little girl to safety. Because his job is to kill her. And if anyone else sees her in there, they will just kill her. So he wants to get her safe. So the next time we flash back, we see that they're like trading trinkets and at pawn shops, and he's not great at haggling, but Kleya is, and Kleya jumps in and negotiates a price and sticks to that price, and they get it. And the pawnbroker's asking them questions, and they just like asks like, what's your name? And he just makes up Luthen, and Kleya on the spot asks if like, where's your wife? And she says, my mother's dead. And she says it with like such venom that Luthen knows why she's saying it like that, because the Imperials have killed her family. Maybe it was Luthen himself, I don't know, doesn't matter. And then the pawnbroker's like, oh, this is your daughter? And he's like, yes. So now we know. Now we know who Luthen and Kleya really were. They were an Imperial soldier and a child he was supposed to kill. Just amazing. And as they're walking away from that pawn shop, she's like, am I your daughter now? And he's like, when it's useful. Right now, we're Luthen and Kleya. And so we don't even know their actual names. Their names, they decided their names are Luthen and Kleya. And we didn't get to see another jump forward where they're at a market and the Empire have like prisoners and they're marching them down to a wall to execute them. And Kleya spots like kids in this chain gang, and she wants to stay and watch, and Luthen's like, we gotta go, there's nothing for us here. And as she's like, no, I'm staying, he goes, okay, you're on your own, and walks off. And so would presumably have just left her there if she didn't catch up to him later. But she watches it, maybe to steel herself, maybe to remind herself why she's fighting. And she asks him, like, when she does catch up to him again, why aren't we fighting back? What are we doing just waiting? We're winning by running away? And he's like, yes, we are going to lose and lose and lose and lose again until we win, because we're fighting to win, and that's what that means. You got to have the stomach for it. And then the last flashback we get is, and again, we're cutting back and forth between Kleya breaking into the hospital to end Luthen, to make sure that they can't torture anything out of him. And she's doing it as we get this last scene of, he takes her to, clearly it's been some time later, and he takes her to like a cafe. Looks Ghorman-y, but just fancy. And they have this desserts on the table, and they're dressed in fine clothes, and he's basically trying to be like, kind of reassure himself that he hasn't just brainwashed this child, and he really wants her to be making the decision. And they can see a bridge across a lake of full of stormtroopers and like vehicles and stuff, and he's got a detonator, and she's like, just push the button, let's get out of here. And he's like, no, I want you to like eat something, look around, look at what you'd be giving up. And it maybe could have been a little clearer here of like, maybe he even gives her an option. You can stay here and you'll find like a real mom and dad, and you'll have a good life and you can chill. I just want to make sure that I'm not just... It's almost reminded me of Leon the Professional with him and Natalie Portman. And he doesn't really make that much of an effort to have her not become an assassin. But it's that, like, I want to make sure I'm not grooming you not in the weird sense, but in the sense of like, well, now you have no other thoughts in your head but what I'm telling you, and I want to make sure you're still aware of the choice you're making. So, and she doesn't really seem to get it because she reaches for the detonator to push it, and he's like, no, I'm doing this. And he pushes it, and it blows up, and the cafe goes crazy. Everyone's screaming and yelling and crying. And I think that's when she recognizes what she's giving away. She recognizes, like, oh, I'm not going to be one of these people who are, like, scared of these explosions and stuff. I'm not going to eat this ice cream and have fine clothes and have a normal family. I'm going to be a soldier in the rebellion. And that is my life's purpose. So that moment of her realization of this is what she's going to do for the rest of her life is juxtaposed with her killing Luthen, sneaking in there, pulling out his like breathing tube or whatever, and he dies on the table. She gets out, she goes back to that apartment that we've seen throughout this season, and pulls out of the wall this like communication device, like Morse code thing, to contact Yavin and Andor. And that's this first episode, and I really like that Andor doesn't appear in it at all. It is all about Luthen and Kleya. We are finally getting full context of their relationship and how much it means that Kleya lives here. So then the next two kind of blend into each other. There's a lot of setup for Rogue One, which is done organically, but also it kind of left me a little, not bored, but like, yeah, I know what this is. Yeah. But there was a lot of good stuff in there. Like, there's a round table scene on Yavin with Mon Mothma in her full, she's got the bob now. She's got her Mon Mothma outfit. And they have Saw Gerrera on a hologram, and they're kind of admonishing him, being like, dude, we know you're on Jedha. Blah, blah, blah. Just work with us, and just showing why they don't mess with him, and he's kind of on the outs and won't join them and stuff. And he's like, you're making it so much more difficult for us. And he's like, I'm hitting, you're hitting these Imperial transports, and you're making it more difficult. And he's like, I don't care. It's fuck the Empire every day, all day. Let's go. He's like, why aren't you on my level? You need to get on my level. And Bail Organa's there, and I like this little moment where Mon Mothma looks at Bail and he's like, the Senate looks easy compared to this, doesn't it? Because clearly he's still, he's here on Yavin, but he's going back and forth, and he's still in the Senate. We get Andor playing with playing not poker, but some kind of card game with K2 and Melshi, and clearly they're all living together because Bix is gone, so it's like a frat house kind of vibe. That's what they say in the Andor Declassified that I watched. Definitely check that out. And Willman is the one who is hearing the pulse message from Kleya. And it's like under his bed, his girl from Ghorman takes it out. It's like, what is this? And he's like, oh my god, this is ringing. Okay, I'll explain to you in a second, but I gotta go tell Andor. So they bring it to Andor. They listen to it. They're like, okay, that's Luthen telling me I gotta come, basically. And it's one last mission. We owe him this. I gotta go. And he tells Willman, like, hey man, you're not gonna go. You need to like go make sure that the plane, that the ship that we're taking is logged as a test flight so that we can get out of here and not get shot down. Because clearly Yavin is very important. And it's made clear in this series how important it is. Anyone who hears about Yavin is either on the planet or gets shot like Lonnie. So they are very rich. They don't want anybody flying willy-nilly because, accidentally you run into an Imperial and now they can trace where you came from. So I appreciate the level of importance that Yavin feels like in this series. Again, if like Jesse Gender, shout out Jesse Gender, mentioned that Tony Gilroy said that this was actually supposed to be 5 whole seasons over 5 years, we might have gotten a little more of the buildup of Yavin, of the fall of the ISB, of all these things that and even the fall of the Senate. All these things that we know to be true in Rogue One and A New Hope. So we could still get more of that somewhere else. I don't know. I mean, Rebels has a lot of it as well. But I like the way they did it here. And I like that I like that Yavin is very kind of reminiscent of where Cassian grew up on Kenari, the jungle planet. I like that it kind of reminds me of Endor a little bit, the Ewok tree houses and whatnot, and that it re-emphasizes that theme that George Lucas was going for all the way back in the 70s, which is the rebellion is diverse. It's made up of different races of people, different species of people, and it's much more natural, and it fits into like the environment of Yavin, which is very lush and green, and while the Empire is all mechanical and very cold and sterile. Andor's mission is to go get Kleya. So he and Melshi and K2 go to Coruscant to rescue Kleya. There's this great scene with the, not stormtroopers, but like basically cops who are, or like riot cops who are in mostly stormtrooper gear, all except helmets, and they're going into the apartment, like they're searching for where the signal is coming from, and they're going into the apartment block to get Kleya, and Andor and Melshi are already there, and K2 realizes that the radios have been cut, so he needs to go in. And the way he goes in and just starts throwing Imperials around, like, it's funny now, but within the context of where we know he came from, it's still scary. And it also kind of contextualizes why Andor is kind of a dick to K2 in Rogue One, that, like, he knows that this robot is part of a genocide. So he's not overly fond of him. He likes him, he's a friend, but he's like, I still remember where you came from. There's even a moment when they're flying to Coruscant, or when they're landing, where, because they're saying like, oh, Melshi's never been to Coruscant because he's fascinated by all the buildings, and K2 is like, I've been here before. I was in a parade here actually with 200 other KX units. The Emperor was even there, and he says it with like reverence because he still has that programming, I guess. But Andor's just like, land over there. Like, he just ignores what he says. I like that subtlety of like, you're still a tool, and I've seen you do horrible things, but I know you're a new person now, but like, it's still there. It's kind of hard to get over that. By the way, Dedra, I love what happens with Dedra. We don't see Dedra that much in these last 3 episodes, but I like the way that we don't see her that much. And because it's like her fading away into obscurity. Her importance has lessened because we saw a lot of her in the beginning of this season. We didn't see that much of her in the beginning of season 1, but eventually we saw more and more of her as her importance grew. And this batch of episodes really made me realize why she and Syril are good parallels and are very similar. They both think they're working for the greater good. They both have this like zealotry towards the Empire, and both of them get fucked over by the Empire in the end. And the way Dedra's is a lot more, I don't know, severe. Even though Syril died and she doesn't die, but her spirit is crushed. Her faith is crushed when she's arrested for doing the raid against Luthen by her former assistant, who's now in charge of Axis. This guy is Imperial to a T. Like, and the way we're seeing officers kind of act a lot more like they acted in the original trilogy, where they were just more stern and cold. And again, we don't get a lot of them in the original trilogy. They're mostly there for Vader to yell at and choke. But they're all very proper and just relaying information, even if they know in the back of their heads, I'm going to get fucked if I screw this up. We're seeing that here, and we're seeing them act with this like impunity. So she's arrested for defying orders and also going around protocol and digging into files she's not really has access to. I mean, she has access to everything, but not his case. And, you know, Partagast, her boss, knows that she's been fishing around in there. And oops, she found something that Lonnie then was able to give to Luthen. So she's in like the interrogation box that we saw Syril in season 1, and Dedra was the interrogator. Now she's being interrogated, and Krennic is the one who shows up. And I love him because he's so singularly focused on the Death Star, and he's so proud of it that he finds this all like trivial and is like, why am I even here? Why would they have called me here? Because he's saying like, what did you do? And she's like, well, I found Axis. I did the thing. And she's so proud of herself. Even in that moment, she's being like, this is what I've done, Krennic. And he's like, okay, but he's dead now. So good for you. But why is Young dead? Why is Lonnie Young dead? Is it maybe have to do with that one little thing that you and I both know I'm here for? And she says Death Star. And he does this thing where he puts his finger on her head, and she just like, you just see all her fear come out at once. And fucking Ben Mendelsohn's eating up the scenery in this scene. Effectively, he's like, okay, you screwed up. Now we have to go chase down his assistant, and we'll do it without you. And she's just going to prison. Like, she doesn't even know really what's going to happen to her, but you're not being brought into the fold, because she has, like, suggestions of how to go do it. And he's like, we'll manage without you. Shut up. You're done. Which is just a fantastic end. Like, you were doing all of this in service of the Empire, in service of fascism, but you bent the rules a little bit, and you don't do that. And once they catch you and you did it and you screwed up, you're disposable. You go to jail. We don't care. You're just like everybody else in jail. Fantastic way to close out her story. I was worried they were going to be like, oh, you did such a good job on Ghorman. You get this post on the Death Star. And then she gets blown up in A New Hope. But I'm glad they did it this way. And she's still alive. A lot of the characters are still alive. It's not like Rogue One where everybody just dies at the end. a lot of the characters live on and, like, you know, could appear in future stuff or not. I don't know if that was the directive from Disney. There's one thing at the end that I will talk about that I think maybe what, but it's also just maybe Tony Gilroy being like, yeah, there's hope. Like, not everybody has to die. It's okay. People can live on and be happy in this rebellion. So I really appreciated what they did there with Dedra. So back to saving Kleya, they do. And there's a great scene of K2 marching into the apartment block. As they're cornered, they're getting shot at. It's a firefight. Kleya's knocked out by a stun grenade. And K2 just mauls these cops as he's going through the hallway. He even picks up the guy who's in charge of Axis, Dedra's assistant, who, again, I'm jumping back again. He goes to visit Dedra in the prison cell. And this is her last lines of the show. To ask her advice. And she's like, why would I help you? He's like, because I know you care about this still. Like, what would we do? You know, what would they do? And she's like, well, they know that we're monitoring everything that we could possibly monitor. So, and we see her reluctance to even give this information, but also that her brain just works. And so she's like, oh, well, I do have an idea. They could be using, like, old code and, like, Morse code and stuff like that. So trace that. And they do. And she was right. It was one last piece of information, one last contribution to this fascist regime that has put her in jail, but she just couldn't help herself and had to help out. So they go to the apartment, and then K2 picks up that guy and is marching towards, like, the captain of the cops. And the cop is just like, oh, whatever, I don't care. And just starts shooting, trying to shoot through him to get to the robot. And it doesn't work. And they're all massacred, and K2 saves them. I'm glad we got a good chunk. Like, this episode really has a lot of K2 in it. And I'm glad we got him in here. But I'm also glad he wasn't strung out throughout the whole show. I think, again, shout out Jesse Gender. Originally, Tony Gilroy's plan for this season, or for more seasons, was or the original plan for Andor as a show was going to be the adventures of Andor and K2. And I'm glad they saved him for this last batch, and we only got really one episode with him prominently. Because he's such a funny character, it kind of would have clashed tonally with the rest of the show. And I'm really glad that they chose to do that. And we still got a good chunk with him and having fun with him. The last episode really, I mean, this and the last episode really kind of is just setting the stage for Rogue One. We hear about Tivik is, like, frantically calling Andor because that's his contact on another planet, Kafrene, I think. And Tivik is the guy that we see in the opening of Rogue One. Andor gets information from and then kills to escape. And we're like, oh man, Andor is such a brutal dude. He will just kill people on the go. And we know why now, because of Luthen. And we even get that mirrored with Luthen killing Lonnie in the beginning of episode 10 of this batch. Like, mirroring that, like, yeah, I will get the information, and then if you're too much of a liability, you're just dead. But I also like how all this setup for Rogue One is also building on this whole series. And it works really organically. And I was really impressed by that. I still was clocking like, oh, this is setup, this is setup, this is setup. But it's organic setup. The reason why that matters, that the contact in Rogue One matters, is because when Andor shows up with Kleya, first of all, they don't even trust that that's them on the ship, so they have all the rebels with their guns. When the ship is landing, the X-Wings were strafing, like, dude, we will shoot you out of the sky if you do not tell us who you are. But they land and they, get Kleya to a sickbay, and they do. And they bring in Andor to the briefing room. And they're like, you defied orders, tell us why. For a man, Luthen, who none of us really trust, except for Mon Mothma. Mon Mothma is this character in every piece of media that she appears in. Even in Return of the Jedi, with her like very few lines and her like the famous line of "Many Bothans died to bring us this information." She cares, and that line reading gave so much weight to like the real people died for this, and probably in the fan imagination over the years of like, who are the Bothans? Why does she care so much? Blah blah blah. We see why she cares so much. She's had to leave her whole life behind, her daughter, her husband that she never really liked, but still her life, her planet, Chandrila. She'll never go back there. And that she knows that every rebel here on Yavin, every rebel in the rebellion, is a person who matters, has a story, has a history, and she has all this empathy. And that really, really informs her character and just gives depth to this one character who we knew just from Return of the Jedi and just showing up to be like the Emperors on the battle station. And that line reading too of like, we know that the Emperor is personally overseeing, and the glee she has that's tempered, but it's still there. It pokes out in Return of the Jedi because we know how much she hates Palpatine. So she's like, oh, this is the chance I've been waiting for. I'm excited that you're going to blow up this thing and it's going to kill Palpatine. Like, the depth of this show. This is the best show on television. But Andor's in the briefing room trying to convince them, like, this information that Luthen died for this. And I know the man. I know the good and the bad. He has used people. He has created this cloud of doubt and secrecy and paranoia. And it's important. And he's created it to save all of us, to help all of us. Yavin wouldn't be here without him. All these rebel cells wouldn't have converged without him. He is the glue that brought all this together. But even though he knew that Yavin wasn't for him. He wasn't going to be one of the generals. He created too much chaos. He was an accelerationist. But Mon Mothma was like, okay, we'll hear him out. And he's saying, like, Jyn Erso. Not Jyn Erso, but he's like, Jedha, Kyber, Ghorman, Kalkite, Erso. Gotta remember these things. These things matter. Like an Imperial engineer named Erso. All of these things matter. This is the information that he died for. It needs to be taken seriously. And they don't. Like, they trust him, but they have too many questions about Luthen. And Mon Mothma, it's a democracy. But they're like, we have to even wait for 2 more generals to return for us to even have, like, a vote on this mission. Or even to try and figure out what's going on. But he's confined to quarters, like being punished for taking the ship. But he requests to go to sickbay first, and Mon Mothma's like, yes, you can, before anybody else can speak, because she knows that Kleya is there, and she has the personal relationship with Andor and Kleya. So Andor goes talks to Kleya, and he's like, I know I promised you a warm welcome. There was resistance when he goes to the apartment to bring her to Yavin. She's like, dude, the people on Yavin don't like Luthen. I don't want to hear him slandered on a planet that he helped build. And yeah, that scene was a little like, yeah, but like, let's get the fuck out of here. Like, what are you going to do? Stay here and die? And probably that was her plan. But she's not. And she's taken to Yavin, and she's got this kind of like wandering sadness about her. Like, she just had to kill her basically father figure, and she doesn't know what to do. Vel sees her and is like, hey, come with me, come have some coffee. And she comes to sit with Vel in her apartment, her tree house. This is out of order, but she's telling her, like, this is what you guys were working for. It's only fair that you share in this thing that you helped build. It's not the end. We will go on, and you will keep his memory alive, and like make sure that people know how important he was to the rebellion. And before this, Mon Mothma meets with Vel to go tell her to talk to Andor because she needs to know from Vel. She's like, yo, Andor is gonna tell you this, and I want you to know. I want you to tell me how much you believe him. And she's supposed to do it on the undercover, but you can tell she's sick and tired of it because Luthen had her doing that. So she goes to Andor and she's like, "Yeah, by the way, my Mothma wants me to know like if this information is valid." And he's like, and they have a nice talk about Luthen and how like, dude, you know him. If he died for this, he wouldn't have done it if he didn't think it was important. And they give a toast to Luthen. They give a toast to everyone. They name all the people on Aldhani. They name Aldhani itself, the Donnie people, Ghorman, the Gore people, Cinta, I think Brasso. I think they mentioned Brasso. They should have mentioned Brasso if they didn't. Ferrix, and just I like that they give this little thing of like the rebels when they toast all the things they're fighting for. That's such a good little touch. But Vel also mentions like, hey, you should contact Bix. Like, I'm in contact with her. You know, Andor's like, I know she's safe. So, okay, maybe when, you know, this things die down a little bit and whatnot. Which is a little tropey in that we know he's not going to make it. And like, oh, how sad. And we'll get there at the end, too. Like, Bail Organa comes to him in the morning. Comes to Andor in the morning. And is like, you know what? You have that mission to go meet with your contact on Kafrene Tivik, right? So what's your parameters and whatnot? Basically, like changing course from the previous night. And Andor's like, why'd you change your mind? And he's like, well, you know what? If I'm fighting the Empire, if I'm going to go out, I want to go out swinging. And he says something, and Andor tells him, like, you know, I think you and Luthen would have gotten along given the chance. Because you're very similar. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of a nice way to like live on that legacy, even though Bail's about to die as well on Alderaan. But that like, yeah, you both have that kind of spirit of like fighting till the end. And the fact that like Luthen was trapped on Coruscant because he wanted to stay there to get as much information out of Lonnie as possible. And out of the contact still on Coruscant as possible and still operate and like was ready to die there. We know this. Like he said in a previous episode, I'm gonna hang here. Like we're both gonna hang here. And that Bail is also stuck on Coruscant, fighting in his own way in the Senate, trying to, you know, stop Palpatine's power from gaining even more. So that parallel too of them both being on Coruscant I liked as well. The series kind of wraps up with this great montage as Cassian is walking to his ship to go fly to Kafrene to meet his contact, which we know is the beginning of Rogue One, where we are flashing across the galaxy and across Yavin to all the characters. And we see Mon Mothma and Vel sharing coffee at this long table with all the other rebels, and how Mon Mothma is, you know, her life quality is down. You know, she's at a table outside with all the other riffraff of the rebellion, and they're all equal. And because she's a senator, she's not more important than anyone else. This sense of camaraderie that we saw on the farm planet back in the first batch of episodes. When they were all eating together. We see Dedra in prison and with the jumpsuit and everything, and in the cell where if you touch the floor outside the cell, it's electrified. She's crying in there. Best way to end that for her. Just you're in prison, bitch. What you gonna do? Now she's also still alive. A lot of these characters are still alive. Kleya looks over the like horizon, sees the sunrise, which is so poetic and almost made me tear up just now. But she gets to see the sunrise that Luthen was working for, that he knew he wasn't going to see, but he was working for it for her. Now we know that it was for her, that he wanted a better universe for his daughter. Oh my God, I'm going to fucking choke up. We see Wilman and his girl on Ghorman having breakfast, just showing that, like, yeah, you could have a family here. You can be happy, rebels. And I love that he's got the orange rebel like vest, puffy vest from the original trilogy. Just it's like he's another rebel. He is one of the rebels. Well, as Cassian's walking, he spots the Force healer, and he like looks at her, and she looks at him like, "Oh, this is the moment." But no verbal, just a little look. Bale even said to him before he started walking, "May the Force be with you," and that's maybe why he looked over at her. Because we know Bale knows Jedi, and oh my God, we see Saw Gerrera looking out to the city of Jeddah with the Star Destroyer above it, right where he is in Rogue One. He's ready for Rogue One to happen. Everyone's waiting for Rogue One to happen because it's about to happen. And then we get the last shot. And the last shot is controversial. Jessie Gender mentioned it in her review. And I understand the criticism of last batch. Bix leaves because Andor was going to leave the rebellion for her. She realized the rebellion needs Andor. Maybe she believed in the Force stuff a little bit when the Force healer was like, he has a place to be. He's a messenger. He has a destiny. And kind of even putting the Chosen One stuff onto Andor is a little like, don't. It was kind of cool that he was just a rando and he contributed to the empire, to the rebellion. Just like all these other characters did, the bellhop on Ghorman, or the Imperial TIE Fighter supervisor person in the first episode of this season, that he talked to and was like, yes, it's going to be worth it. Like, this moment is worth it. It was kind of cool that that's who Andor was. He was just a guy. But this, like, added, like, maybe the Force knows about him and he is being pulled in a direction. He does have a destiny. I don't know. I don't really mind it. It doesn't really impact that much. It's just kind of like a hint. But Bix leaving is emblematic of a trope, a real trope, in movies and media and anything. Of like, well, the woman needs to get out of the way for the man to do his manly mission that he needs to do. Because the woman represents like weakness, and I will give up the mission for you, and temptation, and all those old tropes about women throughout history. And the fact that this show ends with her back on the farm planet. First of all, we get to see B2 Emo again. So I'm glad that he's having fun. He's like playing with another droid. That woman Talia that Brasso was with is still watching over him. And, we get the long tables again of everybody eating together and community. And we see a woman walking through the fields, and it's Bix, and she has a baby. So she was pregnant when she left. And to me, that recontextualizes why she left. She not only left because, you need to do the rebellion and I need to be safe, and I can't be your reason for leaving, and that kind of trope. But it's also for her being like, I'm not going to go on missions anymore because I know I'm pregnant. I need to get away from here because this is a massive target if anyone ever finds out about it, which eventually they do in A New Hope. And I need to keep myself safe and my baby safe. And basically go somewhere and wait for Andor to be done so he can come join his family. I got a little, verklempt watching it. I will also say this baby scene it made me think of Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, where, in real life, Chadwick Boseman died, but to Disney, he's just a character. He's Black Panther, so we want to keep this character alive somehow. How do we do that? We have him have a secret baby that's being taken care of, that's revealed at the end of the movie. And here, again, I wonder if this is a Disney decision or if Tony Gilroy just naturally wanted to have this happen. But it made me think it could have been a Disney directive of like, no, we want Andor to keep living on because the show is so popular. So give him his son at the end, and maybe we'll put him in like Mandalorian stuff in the future. I don't know, but it could be. It could be a Disney directive, and the fact that I even think that makes it feel a little ham-fisted and goes in line with everything else I'm saying here about it. They do a beautiful job of mirroring her looking over the horizon and the sunrise to Andor and Jyn Erso looking at the explosion on Scarif. I will put that image on the screen, but it's really beautiful, and we kind of get maybe a moment, because this is juxtaposed with the shot of him flying away in his ship, which again is a motif throughout this whole show. But it's maybe her realizing like he's dying, or if she feels it in the Force. The baby starts crying. Maybe the baby feels it in the Force that he's off to his death. I don't know. I didn't love it, but and my fiance definitely didn't love it, but it was still it worked. It worked. And overall, I really liked that these last three weren't an end to Andor's story, because Andor's story ends in Rogue One. This was an end to the show. There was an end to Luthen. It was an end. It was about Luthen's legacy and what that means, and Kleya seeing the sunrise and all these rebels like working together instead of fighting and infighting like we saw on Yavin in the first batch with that group who didn't know what to do with Andor, and they started fighting amongst themselves, and how organized they are, and like this is a real fighting chance they have. And this smile that starts to come over her face. See Melshi training rebels, like leading them in a march because he led the prisoners on Narkina 5. We see Vel training rebels how to do good. How to be effective soldiers, because she taught the soldiers on the rebels on Ghorman how to be a better rebel unit. Everyone is placed where they are best. I'm sure Kleya will be one of the communications people there. This show is the best show on television. I'm sad it's only 2 seasons, but I'm glad they nailed both of them. I'm glad each of these arcs felt like a complete story, but also this larger narrative. And how they like it's so many plates to juggle at once, and how they tie it all into Rogue One and A New Hope, the fall of the ISB. Oh, we didn't even talk about what happens to Partagast. Krennic goes to see him after Dedra's in jail, and they fail to capture Kleya. Basically, it's not even. I don't think they're shutting down the ISB, because they still exist in A New Hope, but just very diminished. But it's the end of Partagaz's career. And I like that Krennic goes to meet him, because we saw how Krennic dealt with Dedra. Very, you're beneath me. I shouldn't even be here for you. Go fuck yourself. You're going to jail, bitch. But when he talks to Partagaz, he talks to Partagaz as an equal. And he calls him Leo, like they're on a first name basis. And he's like, I'm not going to be able to help you out of this one. And this was an earlier scene where they're telling the guy in charge of Axis to go get Kleya. And basically, like, she escaped from the hospital. And how quickly and, like, hand-wavy he made the excuse. Because you can't tell him about the Death Star. That's still secret. So he's like, why are we hunting her down? Like, why is she so important? He's like, she escaped from a hospital. She has an infectious disease. It's a disease quarantine. Go get her. So I love that. How he doesn't even care anymore, but he still just naturally coughs out a lie for him. And he's like, okay, that's good enough. And then goes and does it. And Krennic's with him. He's like, I'm not going to be able to help you if you don't find this. Like, even with finding her and stopping this, your department had too many fuck ups and too many, like, I don't know. Nobody knows if Lonnie was working with Dedra. I like that they called Dedra, they suspect her of being a rebel spy. And Krennic mentioned to her in her interrogation, like, well, you missed your calling then, because you would have been great at that, because you keep fucking up for us, the Empire, and breaking rules and stuff like that. So I like that it's insinuated that she maybe in another life could have been an effective rebel, but she was just so hardened to the Empire. Like, they broke her down and told her, like, you're a scavenger. That's what you are at the end of the day. You felt safe in this Empire because you grew up in a kinder block, but this fascist structure is what you felt most comfortable in. But even within it, you still need to, like, scavenge, like, take this is mine, this is mine. And it comes from that, like, presumably being an orphan and needing to eat and stay alive and, like, scavenge little things that you can get. But the way that Krennic talks to Partagast is very much, we're on the same level. I'm kind of sorry this has to happen. Like, you're a good dude, And he leaves. And then when we see Partagast last, because also Partagast was on the communicator for the operation to get Kleya. And we saw in the communications room, there's way less people. So the department is clearly being defunded and phased out. And this is like the last gasp of, like, can you even do this job anymore? Are you even effective anymore? And they're not. And they lose him. They lose Kleya. So it's like, okay, now he knows he's on the chopping block. And he's in his office waiting to get, arrested or told where to go. The former communications guy comes in and is like, yeah, man, they're waiting for you downstairs. And he's like, give me 1 more minute to collect my thoughts. And he shoots himself. Because I don't know exactly why he shoots himself. Maybe he's like, I don't want to live the rest of my life in jail. Or maybe he's like, I don't want to face the Emperor because I've actually met with the Emperor. And I know how he would fuck me up if by failing him. Because I've seen him do it to others. He doesn't want to get force electrocuted. I don't know. But I really liked that detail. And then in the beginning of that scene, before he tells the guy to leave and sits down and shoots himself, he's listening to Nemik's manifesto, and that the rebellion has been, like, broadcasting it and sending it out and spreading it. And this theme that he says, like, Kleya's a super spreader of a disease. And since season 1, he's been referring to the ISB as, we are an antiviral organization. We find diseases and snuff them out. And the disease is rebellion, freedom, these ideas that spread. Just love the themes of that. The last thing I'm going to mention is the motifs in this show. A lot of shots, center shots of people either walking towards the camera or walking away, showing, like, I'm going to do a mission, I'm walking towards my destiny, stuff like that. And similar motif is people in spaceships. We see it at the end of the first arc of season 1, when Luthen and Andor get off of Ferrix and they're going, and that's juxtaposed with Cassian being picked up by Marva and Clem and leaving Kilani and that planet, and, like, how you can kind of see that in the background, and then them going towards their future in the front. We saw it with Mon Mothma last batch of leaving Coruscant and her life and her husband and her daughter behind and going to her next chapter, which is head of the rebellion on Yavin and living there. So we get that as well here with Andor walking towards his ship and flying off on his next chapter, which is Rogue One, and Bix looking towards the sky and hoping that he'll come back or she'll get to see him again. Very powerful metaphors, very great cinematography in this show. Great little moments with tiny characters, one scene characters. Like in the last batch, these two characters who someone's trying to get in to shut down Mon Mothma's speech, but these two characters locked the door, and they were like, the door is supposed to be locked. We locked it. The security clearance is upstairs, just buying a little more time for Mon Mothma to finish her speech. And they're not necessarily actually part of the rebellion. They're just working in the Senate, and they agree with what Mothma is saying. And they were like, we're going to make this guy delayed a little bit, and maybe she'll get to finish her speech. Just those tiny little acts of rebellion. Again, the bellhop on Ghorman, the TIE fighter assistant in the first episode, Brasso and what he did in season 1 of just choosing, like, all right, I'm going to knock out these corporate cops' ship, and I'm going to tie the cable to the junk so that it crashes. And just like people making choices and people choosing freedom over mindless day-to-day, just I'm going to keep going and ignore the larger problem. There's one small detail that I wanted to acknowledge here, and that's in the very beginning of the episode, we see Luthen putting on his wig in front of the mirror that we've seen on his ship in Andor season 1, when he was like getting ready to act out the part of the gallery owner. It was the first time we saw him do that, and now it's the last time. And we see him in the mirror, and he like flips it down, so kind of signaling that his story's at an end. This is the last time he's going to be doing this. Just the little details. It's like poetry, it rhymes.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
I might make more videos about Andor in the future. There's so much to say. I just really love this show, and it's the best anti-fascist show I've ever seen. It's one of the best shows I've ever seen. Disney has a Star Wars Game of Thrones on their hand if they want it. If they want it, they could back up a giant Star Destroyer full of money to Tony Gilroy's house and say, hey man, we want to hire you on to oversee a whole wing of Star Wars, or even the whole franchise going forward. But I know Dave Filoni's got his fists gripped on that, with Mandalorian and Grogu stuff coming out. And I wouldn't be mad about seeing some of these characters who live show up in future projects. I'd hope they wouldn't be like, we're going to make a whole show about Vel, or, but they just show up and they are like, we're here and we're important and you know why. I hope Tony Gilroy gets more to do with Star Wars. I love this tone. I love this story. I love this show, man. I just can't say it enough. Again, I'll make more videos going into greater detail about specific parts, but in general, this has just been a great ride. I wish they had done one episode a week so it lasts longer, at least, and I can more digest each episode, but there was just so much good here. And minor quibbles aside, this is the greatest show on television in a long time. And watch it, celebrate it, watch it a million times. I'm going to watch Rogue One and New Hope later. So, take care. Love y'all. Long live the rebellion. We are the Gore.